Reality usually feels solid right up until it doesn't. A room becomes unfamiliar. A word turns into noise. A clock seems to freeze. You wake up, start your day, and then wake up again. These glitches feel impossible because the mind isn't just recording reality, it's building it in real time. Déjà vu. You step into a place you're sure you've never visited, and for half a second the whole scene arrives with the wrong label, the angle of the table, the person turning near the door, even the exact pause before someone speaks. It feels remembered, not similar. Remembered. That's déjà vu. A strong sense that the present has happened before, paired with the awkward knowledge that it probably hasn't. One useful explanation comes from recognition memory. Familiarity and full recollection are not the same thing. You can get a quick signal of, "I know this," without retrieving where, when, or how you know it. In déjà vu, that familiarity signal may be arriving without a matching memory source. The exact mechanism is still debated, so there isn't one neat switch in the brain we can blame, but the strange part may be the conflict itself. One process says familiar, another checks the records and finds nothing. Usually those systems agree so smoothly you never notice them. For a moment, familiarity arrives without a memory that can explain it. Jamais vu. The opposite glitch can be even stranger because it happens to things you absolutely do know. You walk down your own street and, for a moment, it looks oddly staged. You glance at a familiar face and there's a tiny beat before the usual sense of knowing arrives. You still know where you are. You still know who they are. But the feeling of familiarity has gone missing. This is often called jamais vu, the experience of something familiar feeling unfamiliar. It is not the same as simply forgetting. The factual knowledge may still be there. What slips is the automatic sense of recognition that normally comes with it. So the mind ends up in an awkward split. I know this, without the usual feeling of course I know this. Controlled tasks can produce related feelings of strangeness, including through repetition. That does not explain every everyday episode, but it shows the broader point. Familiarity is something the mind generates, and it can weaken even while identification remains intact. Most days, your street, your kitchen, and familiar faces arrive with recognition already attached. Jamais vu is what it feels like when that attachment briefly fails. The doorway effect. You stand up with a mission, walk across the room, pass through a doorway, stop. Why are you here? This is the famous doorway effect, although the real research is more careful than the internet version. Doorways do not magically erase thoughts every time you cross one, and studies have found that the effect depends on the task and context. Still, there is a useful idea underneath it. The mind breaks continuous life into events. A doorway can act as an event boundary, a signal that one scene is ending and another is beginning. When that happens, the mental model of what is happening right now may update. Information tied to the previous event can become a little less accessible, especially if the goal was fragile to begin with. So you didn't necessarily lose the thought. You changed scenes, and the thought got filed under the scene you just left. That may also be one reason retracing your steps sometimes seems to help. Returning to the earlier setting can bring back cues that were present when the goal was active, though that does not mean the doorway itself caused or stored the forgetting. Semantic satiation. Pick a normal word. Window. Say it quickly, 15 or 20 times. Window, 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 window. At some point, there's a decent chance the meaning starts sliding away. The word looks wrong. The sound becomes suspicious. You know what a window is, yet window suddenly seems like a terrible name for one. That temporary loss or weakening of felt meaning after heavy repetition is called semantic satiation. This overlaps with the broader territory of familiar things feeling strange. But the emphasis here is narrower. Repetition is doing the work, and the word-to-meaning connection is what starts to feel thin. The effect is well documented, even though the fine-grained mechanism is still debated. Repetition seems able to temporarily weaken easy access to the usual connection between a word form and its meaning. What matters for the glitch is simpler. Meaning is not glued permanently to a sound. Your mind has to keep linking the pattern of letters or speech to a concept, repeat the same shell hard enough, and for a moment the link stops feeling automatic. Chronostasis. You glance at an analog clock and the second hand appears frozen, just for a beat. Then it moves normally, and you're left with the mild suspicion that time itself lagged. The name for this is chronostasis, often called the stopped clock illusion. It commonly appears when your eyes jump toward a new target. Those fast eye movements are called saccades, and perception around them is not as simple as a camera recording every frame. In experiments, people often overestimate the duration of the first thing they see after the eye movement. One account is that the perceptual system helps create a smooth timeline around the jump, making that first post-movement moment seem longer than it really was. The exact details are still studied, but the basic result is wonderfully rude. You check the time, and the act of checking briefly changes how long that first moment feels. The clock didn't stop. Your perception of the interval briefly stretched. Pareidolia. A power outlet looks offended. Two windows and a door make a building look shocked. A knot in a wooden panel has somehow developed the expression of a disappointed uncle. You know there is no face there. You still see one. That's pareidolia, perceiving a meaningful pattern in ambiguous input, especially faces in ordinary objects. Faces are unusually important to humans. We read identity, attention, emotion, and intention from them, often very quickly. Research on face pareidolia suggests that face-like objects can engage broad, fast face detection processes, even when the face is just two dark spots over a line. One possibility is that a low threshold for face-like patterns is simply the cost of a system built to detect socially important signals quickly. That is a useful way to think about the bias, not a complete evolutionary explanation. So the system does not wait for courtroom-level evidence. It sees a few strategically placed features and says, "Face?" Most of the time, another part of perception immediately adds, "Relax. It's a backpack." Both can be true at once. That's what makes it funny. Change blindness. Someone edits a photograph while you're looking at it. A railing disappears. A jacket changes color. A large object moves across the scene. And you miss it. Change blindness is the failure to notice a change that can be surprisingly large, especially when the change is separated by a blink, cut, flicker, obstruction, or shift in attention. The uncomfortable lesson is not that your eyes are bad, it's that visual experience feels richer than the information you are actively comparing. You do not maintain a perfect high-resolution copy of every detail in front of you and then inspect the next frame pixel by pixel. Attention selects. Memory holds some features. Comparison happens where the system has enough information and a reason to care. That's why a change can be sitting in plain sight and still fail to enter awareness. Reality feels complete because perception gives you a stable world to act in. It does not hand you the raw footage. And vision is not working alone. The McGurk Effect. Here's a glitch you can trigger with somebody else's mouth. A video shows a person making one speech sound. The audio plays a different one. Instead of choosing one source and ignoring the other, some listeners hear a third sound or hear the audio differently. That audio-visual speech illusion is known as the McGurk Effect. Speech perception is not purely an ear job. The movement of a speaker's lips can contribute to what you think you heard, especially when the signals conflict. The brain is combining information across senses to make its best guess about the event. Not everyone experiences the illusion equally, and the effect depends on the exact stimuli and conditions. Still, it exposes something most of us miss in ordinary conversation. Seeing can alter hearing. You may feel as if vision and sound arrive through separate channels, but speech perception can combine them before you consciously settle on what was said. A different kind of glitch happens when the signal is not conflicting, just ambiguous, and expectation fills in the rest. Phantom vibration. You feel your phone vibrate. Reach into your pocket. Nothing. No call, no message, no vibration. Phantom vibration is the false sensation that a phone or pager has buzzed when it hasn't. Studies have found it in many phone users, and most people who report it do not describe it as a major problem. Why does it happen? There probably isn't one settled explanation. Expectation is a strong candidate. When a signal matters and occurs often, attention becomes ready for it. Normal pressure from clothing, a small muscle twitch, movement against the skin, or another ambiguous sensation may be interpreted as the expected buzz. In other words, the mind may be making a reasonable mistake with noisy data. Once attention is tuned for a familiar signal, an ambiguous sensation can occasionally be read as that signal. False awakening. You wake up, Turn off the alarm. Walk to the bathroom. Maybe check the time. Everything feels completely ordinary. Then you wake up. For real this time. A false awakening is a dream in which you believe you have awakened. It can be especially convincing because the dream does not need dragons or impossible cities. It can simply simulate the room you already expect to see. Research links false awakenings with other unusual states around dreaming, including lucid dreaming and REM-related experiences, though there is no single settled mechanism. The disturbing part is how little weirdness is required to fool you. We imagine reality testing as some grand internal detective process, but most mornings, you do not prove the room exists. You see the expected bed, expected wall, expected routine, and continue. One useful way to think about a false awakening is that an ordinary-looking dream gives those expectations very little reason to object. The room looks right. The routine starts normally. So the illusion can stay convincing until something finally breaks it. Then you wake again. Sleep paralysis. Sometimes waking up is not the clean switch it feels like. Awareness returns. The room is there. You know you're awake, but the body will not move. Sleep paralysis is a state in which the muscle atonia associated with REM sleep persists into wakefulness or appears around the transition into or out of sleep. In plain English, part of the sleep system is still applying the do not act out the dream break after awareness has come back online. Some episodes also include vivid sensory experiences, such as a sensed presence, pressure, sounds, or visual imagery. Not everyone has these, and they do not require a paranormal explanation. Dreamlike perception and waking awareness can overlap in deeply convincing ways. An episode can be frightening, but the mechanism itself is a known sleep phenomenon. And if episodes become frequent, distressing, or interfere with sleep, professional medical guidance is worth seeking. This one feels supernatural because the timing error happens inside the machinery that normally tells you what state you're in. The Mandela Effect. You remember the image clearly. So do other people. Then someone shows you the original, and the detail you all remember was never there. The Mandela Effect is a popular term for shared, consistent false memories. It became famous online, but researchers have also studied cases where many people make the same specific visual memory errors for familiar cultural icons. That does not mean every viral example is equally strong, and it definitely does not require an alternate timeline. Memory is reconstructive. We rebuild past events from stored details, general knowledge, expectations, and later information. Similar images can blend. A typical feature can sneak into a remembered object. Repeated discussion can strengthen confidence without repairing accuracy. The weird part is the agreement. We expect memory errors to be random. Shared culture, repeated exposure, visual conventions, and similar expectations may help some errors converge, though no single explanation covers every example. From shared memory errors, the next glitch moves somewhere more immediate, the way time itself feels while you are living through it. Time distortion. 5 minutes waiting for an important reply can feel longer than an entire evening with friends. A frightening second can seem stretched. A familiar commute disappears. A boring meeting develops its own climate. Time distortion is not one single illusion with one single cause. It is a broad fact of human experience. Subjective time can expand or contract depending on attention, emotion, arousal, memory, task demands, and context. When you monitor time closely, you notice more of it. When attention is absorbed elsewhere, long periods can seem short in the moment. Emotion and arousal can alter duration judgments too, but the direction is not always simple. It depends on what is happening and how time is measured. That's why the brain has one internal clock is usually too neat. Your watch counts intervals. You experience them. Those are not the same job. The next glitch is different again. This time, the problem is not duration. It is what happens when something looks almost familiar enough to be human. The Uncanny Valley. A cartoon robot is cute, a real human is normal. Then something lands almost perfectly between them, and your entire nervous system quietly says, no. The Uncanny Valley is the idea that an artificial figure can become more unsettling as it approaches human likeness without fully getting there. Think highly realistic digital faces, humanoid robots, or animation where the skin looks convincing but the eyes, timing, or movement feel slightly off. It is a famous hypothesis, not a single settled law of perception, and researchers still debate why it appears. One useful lens is mismatch. The closer something gets to a familiar human category, the more strongly a small error in the eyes, timing, movement, or expression may stand out. Other cases may involve category uncertainty or conflicting cues, so there probably is not one explanation for every uncanny face or robot. Derealization. This last, one needs a different tone because it is not just a fun laboratory illusion. Sometimes the world feels unreal. A familiar street looks flat or dreamlike. Voices seem far away. People you know feel visually present but strangely distant. You understand that the world has not literally changed, yet your experience of it has. That experience is called derealization. Brief feelings of unreality can occur, but persistent or repeated episodes can also be part of a clinically significant problem. Derealization is not the same as believing an alternate reality has replaced this one, and having the experience does not automatically mean someone has a disorder. Its mechanisms are complex, and it should not be reduced to one internet explanation like, it's always trauma or it's just anxiety. Different people can arrive there through different pathways. What makes it belong in a list of reality glitches is the gap itself. Perception says the world is present, while the feeling of reality has gone thin. If that becomes persistent, frightening, or disruptive, qualified professional support can help. The strange thing about all of these glitches is that reality usually isn't breaking. A familiarity signal fires without a memory. Attention misses a change. The senses negotiate. A dream copies the morning. Time stretches because experience is not a stopwatch. The mind gives you a world that feels immediate and complete. But underneath, it is constantly selecting, predicting, comparing, filling gaps, and updating the scene. Most of the time, the construction is invisible. Then something slips for half a second. And you finally notice the builder.